Rescued from waters without memory or name, a young man becomes the center of an ancient intrigue. His face revives legends, and his presence threatens those who built empires on lies. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe so we can keep creating stories like this one. The air was filled with the fragrance of jasmine growing around the central garden of Blackwood Estate, located on the outskirts of Savannah. The imposing colonial structure, with its terracotta adobe walls and spacious corridors with columns, represented the glory of one of Georgia's most powerful families. The majesty of that place contrasted with the small figure crossing the main courtyard, carrying a silver tray. Hope Reynolds, 32 years old, walked with her head slightly bowed, as dictated by the unwritten protocol for the estate's service staff. Her steady hands held the tray where a fine porcelain tea service rested, destined for the private study of Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, heiress and current director of the family's agribusiness empire. "Excuse me, ma'am," Hope murmured as she entered the office after being granted permission. The room was a sanctuary of power. Hand-carved mahogany bookshelves reached the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. An imposing desk dominated the center, and behind it, seated with a back straight as a rod, Victoria reviewed documents with a concentrated expression. At 40, her aristocratic bearing and the intensity of her dark brown gaze commanded instant respect. "Leave it there, please," Victoria indicated without looking up from her papers. Hope placed the service on a side table and began to pour the tea, as she had done every afternoon during the 3 months she had been working in the ladies' personal area. In that brief time, she had managed to rise from the kitchens to the select group of servants who directly attended the family, thanks to her silent efficiency and absolute discretion. "Is there anything else you need, Mum?" Hope asked in a soft voice. Victoria finally looked up. For a second, her eyes met those of the servant, and a flash of recognition seemed to cross her face, so fleeting that it could have been anyone's imagination. But it was not Hope's imagination, who quickly lowered her gaze. "No, that's all, thank you." When the door closed behind Hope, the woman allowed herself a moment of weakness. She leaned against the hallway wall and breathed deeply. No one knew that she was not there by chance. 15 years earlier, when Victoria was barely a young heiress of 25 and Hope a teenager of 17, their paths had crossed in circumstances that would forever change the course of both lives. At the estate, the coming weeks would be full of activity. The Blackwood family was preparing for the annual harvest celebration, a traditional event where the country's most important business people would gather under the pretext of celebration, but with the purpose of closing commercial and political agreements. Hope knew that this year was particularly important, because since Mrs. Victoria had taken the reins of the family empire after her father's retirement, Mr. Richard, certain sectors had tried to destabilize her leadership. The servant continued with her daily tasks, meticulously cleaning every corner of the East Wing where the main rooms were located. Her presence was almost imperceptible, moving like a shadow between the wide corridors decorated with paintings of illustrious Blackwood ancestors. This quality allowed her to observe without being noticed, to listen without seeming interested. It was thus that, during Thursday afternoon, while cleaning the silver candelabras in the room adjacent to the boardroom, she managed to distinguish fragments of a disturbing conversation. "The board cannot continue to tolerate Victoria's progressive ideas," said a male voice that Hope recognized as that of Marcus Ellis, the lady's second cousin and financial director of the Blackwood companies. "This labor reform she proposes will ruin our profit margins." "Patience, Marcus," replied another calmer voice, which belonged to Jack Owens, a family business partner with political connections. "Everything is in motion. During the harvest celebration, we will present the restructuring proposal. With the support we have, Victoria will be left as a mere decorative figure." Hope remained motionless, her heart beating rapidly as she processed what she had just heard. It wasn't simply a difference in business opinions, it sounded like a conspiracy to strip Mrs. Victoria of effective control of the companies she had legitimately inherited. In the following days, Hope sharpened her senses even more. She noticed unusual meetings at strange hours, documents disappearing from the lady's office, and even observed Victoria's personal assistant, Gabrielle Mitchell, copying information from her boss's computer when she wasn't present. One morning, as Hope was changing the flowers in the main hallway, she saw something that left her frozen. Jack Owens was saying goodbye to Marcus with a handshake that included a subtle gesture, the thumb rubbing twice across the back of the other's hand. A gesture identical to the one she had seen years ago when she was rescued from a group of assailants by members of a secret association that called itself the Land Guardians, dedicated to protecting Georgia's traditional agricultural interests against modernizing reforms. That gesture was no coincidence. The same people who once saved her were now conspiring against the woman to whom Hope owed her true salvation. The irony did not escape her understanding, nor did the gravity of the situation. That night, while preparing Mrs. Victoria's room for her rest, Hope noticed that the lady looked particularly exhausted. "Are you all right, ma'am?" she dared to ask while arranging the pillows. Victoria, who normally maintained a professional distance from the staff, sighed deeply. "It's just business concerns, Hope. Nothing that should worry you." "With all due respect, ma'am, sometimes worries are relieved when they're shared," Hope replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Victoria looked at her intently, as if evaluating her. "You have a peculiar way of speaking for a servant," she observed. "Where did you work before coming here?" Hope felt a knot in her throat. The moment she had both feared and waited for was approaching, but it wasn't yet time for revelations. "In several houses in Atlanta, ma'am. I learned by observing." "There's something about you," Victoria began, but was interrupted by the sound of her phone. The call seemed urgent, and the conversation was suspended. As she withdrew, Hope knew she must act soon. The harvest celebration was only 2 weeks away, and with it, the danger that lurked for the woman who, without knowing it, had changed her life many years ago. Her debt that Hope was determined to pay, even if it meant exposing herself and risking everything she had built. On the horizon, the lights of Savannah twinkled like fallen stars, reminding her that outside the walls of the estate existed a much larger and more complex world. A world where fate had intertwined her humble life with that of one of the most powerful women in Georgia, in a dance that was just beginning to reveal itself. The dawn light filtered timidly through the thick curtains of Hope's room, located in the service wing of Blackwood Estate. She got up before the other employees, as was her custom. This habit allowed her to enjoy a few minutes of solitude, valuable time to organize her thoughts and, lately, to plan her movements. As she fixed herself in front of the small mirror, her eyes stopped at the almost imperceptible scar that crossed her left collarbone, a permanent reminder of that rainy night on the outskirts of Savannah 15 years ago. The night she met Victoria Blackwood. The memory invaded her like an unexpected wave. It was 2009. Hope, barely 17, worked in a small grocery store on the outskirts of the city. That night, a storm was lashing the region when a drenched and disoriented young woman entered seeking shelter. She wore expensive but simple clothes, without the luxuries that a Blackwood would normally flaunt. She introduced herself simply as Victoria, explaining that her car had broken down while returning from visiting a social project. "May I use your phone?" she had asked, with a kindness that contrasted with her evident social position. Hope led her to the back room, but when they were about to call, they heard vehicles stopping abruptly outside. Through the window, they saw a group of men armed with sticks and machetes. "It's her, Blackwood's daughter," one shouted. "Let's show her what we think of her new land policies." They were farmers enraged by rumors that the Blackwoods planned to change the use of communal lands. False rumors, as would be discovered later, planted by family competitors. Without thinking twice, Hope turned off the lights, closed the store, and led Victoria through a back door to the small dwelling where she lived with her sick grandmother. For 3 days, while tension decreased in the streets and the roads again became safe, the Blackwood heiress remained hidden in that humble house. 3 days in which two women from opposite worlds shared more than a space. They shared stories, dreams, and an unexpected connection. Upon leaving, Victoria had given Hope a brooch with the Blackwood family crest. "If you ever need anything, present yourself with this at the estate," she had said. What Victoria never knew was that same day after her departure, The land guardians attacked the store where Hope worked, mistakenly believing that she had turned the heiress over to the authorities. The scar on her collarbone was the result of her attempt to defend the small business. The sound of movement in the hallways brought her back to the present. She carefully stored the blackwood brooch in the inner pocket of her uniform, where she carried it every day, and went out to begin her duties. The morning passed with the usual routine, serving breakfast, cleaning the main rooms, assisting in organizing the preparations for the harvest celebration. However, Hope kept her senses alert. During the previous week, she had developed a mental map of the conspiracy that was being woven around Mrs. Victoria. Marcus Ellis, Victoria's cousin, seemed to be the main link with external interests. Gabrielle Mitchell, the personal assistant, leaked confidential information. Jack Owens coordinated everything from the outside. But something was still missing, a key piece that would explain how they planned to neutralize Victoria during the celebration. That afternoon, while cleaning Marcus's private study, a task that normally corresponded to another servant, but which Hope had strategically exchanged, she found her opportunity. Marcus had left precipitously after a call, leaving his tablet unlocked on the desk. With quick but careful movements, Hope reviewed the recent emails. What she discovered chilled her blood. In an exchange with Jack Owens, the plan was detailed. During the gala dinner of the harvest celebration, they would serve Victoria a special tea that would contain a potent mixture of herbs, not to cause permanent physical harm, but to provoke symptoms similar to a severe anxiety attack. The intention was for Victoria to appear mentally unstable in front of the most important guests. Just before Marcus presented an emergency motion to temporarily assume control of the companies for the good of the family. The sound of approaching footsteps alerted her. Quickly, she left the tablet exactly as she had found it and pretended to be cleaning a lamp when Marcus returned to the study. "What are you doing here?" he asked with evident annoyance. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ellis. Marissa is indisposed today and they asked me to cover her areas," she responded with her head bowed. Marcus looked at her with suspicion but finally dismissed her with an impatient gesture. Hope left with her heart hammering against her chest, but sure of having maintained an appearance of calm. Now she knew what they were planning, but how could she stop them? If she went directly to Mrs. Victoria, would she believe a simple servant over her own family and trusted assistants? And exposing herself would mean revealing her true identity and the reason for her presence at the estate, something for which she was not yet prepared. That night, while helping to place floral arrangements for a small reception prior to the E-18 grand celebration, Hope noticed that Victoria was observing her with certain intensity from the other side of the room. The lady excused herself from her interlocutors and approached her with measured and elegant steps. "Hope, I understand that today you were in my cousin Marcus's study," she commented in a neutral tone, but with an inquisitive look. "Yes, ma'am. I covered for Marissa, who felt indisposed," she responded, maintaining her composure. "Marcus mentioned he saw you reviewing some documents on his desk." Hope's pulse quickened. "With all due respect, ma'am, Mr. Ellis must be confused. I was only cleaning the lamps and bookshelves." Victoria evaluated her for a long moment before speaking again. "I've been watching you, Hope. You're not like the other servants. You move through the estate with a purpose, almost as if you were looking for something or watching someone. It was time to make a decision. Hope could maintain her facade and possibly lose Victoria's trust or risk revealing part of the truth. "Ma'am, there are things happening in this house that should concern you," she finally said, lowering her voice. "I'm not who should be speaking. Garvit, but if you'll allow me a private moment." Victoria's expression tensed slightly, but she nodded. "In my office, after dinner?" The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Gabrielle Mitchell, who cast a suspicious look at Hope before claiming her boss's attention for an urgent matter. The hours until after dinner seemed to stretch endlessly. Hope fulfilled her duties like an automaton, her mind occupied planning what she would say and what she would keep silent in her meeting with Victoria. When she finally presented herself at the office, she found Mrs. Victoria reviewing documents with a tired expression. The heiress looked up and indicated she should take a seat, an unusual gesture toward an employee that marked the exceptional nature of the situation. "Speak," she ordered simply. "Ma'am, I've heard and seen worrying things. Your cousin Marcus, along with Mr. Owens and, I'm afraid also Miss Mitchell, are planning something against you during the harvest celebration." Hope proceeded to explain what she had discovered, omitting mentioning the tablet, but providing enough details to be convincing. With each word, she carefully observed Victoria's reactions, fearing to see disbelief or anger. Instead, she saw how the woman's aristocratic composure slowly transformed into a mixture of disappointment and resolution. "Why are you telling me this, Hope? What do you gain from this revelation?" It was the question Hope had anticipated and feared. She breathed deeply. "Because I believe in justice, ma'am, and because..." She hesitated for a moment before continuing, "and because long ago someone taught me that even between different worlds, loyalty can exist." Victoria's eyes narrowed, studying her with renewed interest. "There's something familiar about you that I can't quite identify. Have we seen each other before you came to work here?" The moment for the complete truth had not yet arrived, Hope decided. "Perhaps, ma'am. Paths cross in strange ways. But what's important now is to protect you from what they're planning." Victoria remained silent for what seemed like eternity. Finally, she stood up and walked to the window, turning her back to Hope while observing the gardens illuminated by the moon. "I believe you," she said finally. "I've noticed tensions and conversations that cease abruptly when I enter a room, but I need concrete evidence to act against my own family and people who have been by my side for years." "I understand, ma'am, and I believe I can help you get that evidence if you'll allow me." Victoria turned to her with an expression that Hope couldn't completely decipher. "Why would you risk your position for me?" "We all have our reasons." "For doing the right thing, Mrs. Blackwood." At that moment, thunder sounded in the distance, announcing a storm approaching the estate. Like that night, 15 years ago, when fate had first intertwined their lives. The dawn of the following day brought with it a clear sky that contrasted with the storm of thoughts in Hope's mind. The conversation with Mrs. Victoria had changed the course of events, but it had also increased the risks. Now, as she prepared breakfast for the lady, she mentally reviewed the details of what they had agreed upon the night before. "We need tangible evidence," Victoria had said. "Something I can show the board to neutralize any attempt by Marcus and his allies." The plan was simple in theory, but dangerous in practice. Hope would use her position as a servant to gather evidence of the conspiracy, while Victoria would keep up appearances, pretending to be unaware of everything. The trust between the two women was fragile, built more on necessity than on a solid foundation. Hope knew this well, but she also understood that it was her only opportunity. With the breakfast tray perfectly prepared, she headed to the master bedroom. She found Victoria already dressed and reviewing documents at the small desk by the window. "Good morning, ma'am," Hope greeted as she placed the tray on the small table. "Good morning," Victoria replied, without looking up from her papers. Then, in a lower voice, she added, "Gabrielle asked to see you today. Be careful." Hope nodded imperceptibly and continued with her tasks as if nothing unusual had been mentioned. The warning confirmed her suspicions. After her conversation with Victoria in the salon, she had caught the personal assistant's attention. It was predictable, but no less concerning. By mid-morning, while cleaning one of the secondary rooms, Gabrielle Mitchell appeared in the doorway. With her impeccable tailored suit and designer briefcase, she represented the antithesis of Hope. "Reynolds, can we talk for a moment?" she asked, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course." "Miss Mitchell." Gabrielle closed the door behind her, a gesture that immediately put Hope on alert. "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time around Mrs. Victoria lately," Gabrielle began, walking slowly around the room, examining the decorative objects with feigned interest. "And yesterday I saw you conversing in an intimate manner." "I'm just fulfilling my duties, miss," Hope replied, maintaining a respectful but neutral tone. "The lady sometimes has specific requests about how to organize her personal spaces." Gabrielle let out a dry laugh. "We both know there's more to it than that. I'll tell you directly, this estate functions like a Swiss watch because each person knows their place and stays in it. Servants don't make friends with the lady of the house. The implicit threat floated in the air, almost tangible. Hope lowered her gaze, playing the role of the intimidated employee. I understand perfectly, Miss Mitchell. I don't intend to overstep my boundaries. I'm glad you understand, Gabriel smiled, coming close enough to stand in front of Hope, because it would be a shame if someone with your efficiency had to be fired, especially when the harvest celebration is so close and we need trusted staff. With those words, Gabriel left the room, leaving behind a trail of expensive French perfume and veiled threats. Hope breathed deeply, trying to calm her racing pulse. The confrontation confirmed she was on the right track, but also that time was running out. That same afternoon, taking advantage of the fact that most of the administrative staff had left for a meeting in the city, Hope put the first phase of her plan into action. With the excuse of cleaning the empty offices, she first headed to Gabriel's office. She knew the assistant kept a backup copy of all important documents on a USB drive she carried on a keychain with the Blackwood Company logo. She didn't find the keychain, as expected, but did discover something equally valuable: a detailed calendar of the harvest celebration with handwritten notes in the margins. Next to the gala dinner, there was a specific note: VB main table, special tea served by SM. The initials corresponded to Victoria Blackwood and presumably Scott Miller, the head waiter hired specifically for the event, who had been recommended by Marcus. Quickly, Hope took photos of the calendar with the small phone she had acquired for this purpose. Then she continued with her round of cleaning, finally arriving at Marcus Ellis's office. Here her search was more fruitful. In a poorly closed drawer, she found an envelope with legal documents prepared to be presented to the board. Upon reviewing them, she discovered they were a restructuring proposal that would effectively transfer operational control of the Blackwood companies to a temporary executive committee led by Marcus, citing concerns about the emotional instability of the current director. The sound of approaching voices alerted her. Quickly, she photographed the documents, returned everything to its place, and resumed her cleaning duties. Seconds later, Marcus entered, accompanied by Jack Owens. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Hope murmured, feigning surprise. "I'm almost finished here." "Hurry up," Marcus ordered impatiently. As she gathered her cleaning supplies, Hope heard fragments of the conversation. "Everything is ready for the day after tomorrow," Jack was saying in a low voice. "The investors are eager to see the change of direction in the Blackwood companies. Victoria doesn't know what's coming for her," Marcus replied with a smile that Hope could see reflected in the glass of a picture frame. "This time, the Blackwood name will return to representing the traditional values that my uncle abandoned with his progressive ideas." Hope left the office with her head down, but with her heart racing. Now she had concrete evidence and verbal confirmation of Marcus's intentions. Only one crucial element remained: discovering exactly what the special tea they planned to serve Victoria contained. That night, as the estate sank into silence, Hope slipped silently toward the kitchens. She knew that special ingredients for important events were kept in a specific locked pantry, a copy of which was held by the housekeeper, Mrs. Evelyn, an older woman who had served the Blackwoods for decades. Using a modified hairpin, a technique she had learned in her hardest years, Hope managed to open the lock. Inside, among various labeled containers, she found one simply marked as Ceremonial Tea, VB. Upon opening it, a strong herbal aroma invaded her senses. She immediately recognized the combination, a potent mixture of valerian, passion flower, and other herbs that in concentrated doses would produce dizziness, confusion, and symptoms similar to an anxiety attack. She took a small sample in a paper envelope she had brought with her and carefully closed the container again. With the evidence collected, it was time to inform Victoria. However, as she headed toward the main wing of the estate, a noise startled her. She quickly hid behind a column and saw Michael, the estate's head of security, making an unexpected round. Hope held her breath as the man passed just a few meters from her. Michael Thompson was an enigma. He had been in the service of the Blackwoods for more than 20 years and his loyalty seemed to be to the family institution rather than to any specific individual. It wasn't clear if he was part of the conspiracy or if he was simply doing his duty without asking questions. In any case, he was someone Hope preferred to avoid. When the path was clear, she continued toward Victoria's private rooms. As they had agreed, she gave 3 soft knocks on the door, followed by 1 louder one. The door opened silently. Victoria was waiting for her in a silk robe with her hair loose falling over her shoulders, an image very different from the impeccable businesswoman she showed to the world. For an instant, Hope glimpsed in her the young Victoria from 15 years ago, vulnerable and human beneath the facade of power. "What have you discovered?" Victoria asked, indicating she should take a seat, another unusual gesture that marked the extraordinary territory in which their relationship moved. Hope showed her the photographs and handed her the envelope with the tea sample. "They plan to make you drink this during the gala dinner. The mixture isn't lethal, but it would leave you in a state of confusion and anxiety. Marcus has documents prepared to present to the board, claiming your emotional instability as a pretext for a change in leadership." Victoria examined the photographs with a somber expression. "Marcus has always resented that my father chose me to succeed him, but I never thought he would go this far. The betrayal also comes from Gabriel and possibly other members of your inner circle," added Hope. "And you?" Victoria suddenly asked, fixing her eyes on Hope's. "Why should I trust you? You appear out of nowhere, earn a place close to me, and suddenly discover a conspiracy. How do I know you're not part of it, seeking to gain my trust?" The question, though painful, was legitimate. Hope knew that the time had come to reveal at least part of the truth. "Ma'am, we met 15 years ago, during the storm that hit the region. You sought refuge in a small grocery store where I worked." Victoria's eyes opened with surprise and recognition. "The girl from the store. Was that you?" "Yes, ma'am. You stayed 3 days in my house while the roads were cleared. You gave me this before leaving." Hope took from her pocket the brooch with the Blackwood crest that she had kept all these years. Victoria took the brooch with trembling hands, the definitive confirmation that Hope was telling the truth. "But why didn't you say anything when you started working here?" "Because I didn't come seeking recognition or reward, ma'am. I came because after your departure, my life changed dramatically. And when I heard they needed staff for the private area, I felt it was time to repay what you did for me." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Hope had deliberately omitted the subsequent attack and the difficult years that followed, when she had to rebuild her life from scratch after the Land Guardians destroyed everything she had. Victoria observed her for a long time, as if trying to fit all the pieces of an incomplete puzzle. "I believe you," she said finally, "and now we must act. The celebration is the day after tomorrow, and we have no time to lose." Together, they began to elaborate a counterplan. It wouldn't be enough to simply avoid drinking the tea. They needed to completely expose the conspiracy and ensure that Marcus and his allies faced the consequences of their actions. "We'll need help," said Victoria, after analyzing several options. "I can't trust Gabriel or most of my usual team. There's someone who might help us, although I'm not sure of his loyalty," Hope suggested cautiously. "Michael Thompson. The head of security. He's been with the family his whole life, but he's always been a reserved man." "Exactly. He doesn't seem to be aligned with Marcus, but he hasn't given signs of opposing him either. His commitment seems to be to the stability of the estate above all else." Victoria considered the idea for a moment. "It's risky, but it could work. If we get Michael on our side, we'd have access to crucial resources to confront Marcus." With dawn approaching, they finalized the details of their strategy. Hope was preparing to return to her quarters when Victoria stopped her with a hand on her arm. "There's something else I want to know," she said in a soft but firm voice. "What happened after I left your house 15 years ago? I feel there's a part of the story you're not telling me." Hope hesitated. That chapter of her life was full of pain and loss, and revealing it now could complicate the situation even more. But as she contemplated Victoria's expectant eyes, she understood that the trust between them had to be bi-directional. "After you left, ma'am, I received an unexpected visit. Victoria's expression tensed as she waited for Hope to continue her account. The silence between the two women became dense, charged with untold stories and secrets that were about to come to light. "After you departed," Hope began with a soft but firm voice, "I received a visit from a group of men who called themselves the Land Guardians. They came to the grocery store where I worked, accusing me of having helped the enemy of the farmers." Victoria paled. "Marcus mentioned that group once. He said they were defenders of traditional agricultural values. That's the image they project, ma'am. But in reality, they're a pressure group serving very specific interests. That night they destroyed the store where I worked, threatened my sick grandmother, and..." Hope unconsciously brought her hand to the scar on her collarbone. "They left me this as a reminder of what happens to those who betray their ideals." "My God," Victoria murmured, covering her mouth with her hand. "And I never knew, never went back to make sure you were okay." "It wasn't your responsibility, ma'am. You were protecting your own life." "But I should have done something. My family has influence, resources." "What's done is done," interrupted Hope with a serenity that contrasted with the gravity of her story. "What's important is that now, 15 years later, I've discovered that some of the same men who destroyed my life are working with your cousin Marcus. The same recognition gesture, the same rhetoric about traditional values. It's not a coincidence." Victoria stood up and began to walk around the room, processing all this new information. "So this isn't just a family power struggle or a matter of business direction. It's something bigger, older." "Exactly. Your father, Mr. Richard, implemented changes that benefited workers and communities where you have properties. Better wages, educational programs, property titles for families who have worked the lands for generations, all that threatened the interests of those who have exploited farmers for decades. And now that I'm continuing those policies, they want to stop me," Victoria concluded, using my own cousin as the visible head. "Marcus has always envied your position, ma'am. For him it was easy to ally himself with these external interests." Dawn was beginning to illuminate the room, casting long shadows through the half-open curtains. Both women understood that time was running out. "I must return to my quarters before they notice my absence," said Hope, rising. "Wait," Victoria stopped her again. "There's something I don't understand. If the Guardians did so much harm to you for helping me, why risk yourself now? Why come here? Expose yourself to being recognized?" Hope smiled slightly. "Because during those 3 days you spent in my house, I saw something that gave me hope. An heiress who spoke to my grandmother as if she were her equal, who helped cook beans without complaining, who was genuinely interested in the difficulties of the farmers. If people like you can have real power, then it's worth fighting to keep them in that place." With these words, Hope silently withdrew, leaving Victoria immersed in deep reflections on responsibility, privilege, and the true meaning of power. The next 24 hours passed in barely disguised tension. The estate boiled with activity, with the final preparations for the harvest celebration. Catering trucks, decorators, sound technicians, and extra staff transited the normally quiet spaces of the property. In the midst of this organized chaos, Hope and Victoria discreetly executed their plan. The first step was to approach Michael Thompson. Victoria summoned him to her office for a private meeting, where Hope was also present, to the security chief's surprise. "Michael, I've spent 25 years observing you serve this family with unquestionable loyalty," Victoria began in a solemn tone. "Today I need to know exactly where that loyalty resides, with the Blackwood family as an institution, or with the people who really care about the well-being of all who depend on us." The man with the impassive face and graying hair remained silent for a few seconds before responding. "My loyalty, Mrs. Victoria, has always been with what your grandfather taught me when he hired me when I was barely a young man, to protect not only the family, but what the family represents when it acts honorably." It was the answer they were hoping for, although expressed in an enigmatic way. Victoria then proceeded to reveal to him the details of the conspiracy, showing him the evidence gathered by Hope. Michael's reaction was minimal. Just a hardening of his gaze and a slight tension in his jaw betrayed his indignation. "I've noticed unusual movements. But I didn't imagine they would go so far, he finally commented. Mr. Marcus has always been ambitious, but this, he paused, while examining the tea sample. This is a betrayal of everything the Blackwood name represents. Can we count on you, Michael? Victoria asked directly. To the last consequences, ma'am. With Michael on board, the plan was refined. The strategy would be dual. First, prevent Victoria from consuming anything specially prepared for her during the gala dinner. Second, gather definitive evidence that would allow them to confront Marcus and his allies in front of the most important guests, including board members, influential politicians, and community leaders. Michael assigned 2 of his most trusted men to discreetly monitor the kitchens and supervise all food and drink destined for the main table. Meanwhile, Hope would be responsible for staying close to Victoria at all times, under the pretext of being assigned as her personal assistant for the event, arguing that Gabriel would be too busy coordinating the VIP guests. This last point generated the expected reaction. Gabrielle vehemently opposed, insisting that she should be next to Victoria throughout the night. It's precisely because I trust you to handle the most important guests that I need someone else for practical matters, Victoria explained, with feigned innocence. Hope is discreet and efficient. No one will notice her presence, but she'll be there if I need anything. Gabriel had to yield, although not without first casting a venomous look toward Hope. As you wish. But remember that some people don't know their place, and that can be problematic. The day of the celebration dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself wanted to contribute to the splendor of the event. From dawn, the estate transformed into a hive of frantic activity. In the midst of this whirlwind, Hope maintained calm, fulfilling her usual tasks, while observing every suspicious movement. By mid-morning, she caught a conversation between Marcus and Scott Miller, the head waiter hired especially for the occasion. They were in a secluded corner of the back patio, speaking in low voices. Remember, Mrs. Blackwood must receive the special tea just before the main toast, Marcus was instructing. It's a traditional herbal blend that she especially appreciates. You must serve it personally. Understood, Mr. Ellis. Any other special instructions? Yes, immediately afterward, you must keep your attention on her. If you notice any discomfort, let me know discreetly. Hope silently moved away, having confirmed what they already knew. She sought out Michael to inform him, who in turn would warn his men. The net was tightening, but they were prepared. In the afternoon, while helping Victoria prepare for the event, Hope noticed the tension in the businesswoman's face. Everything will be fine, ma'am, she assured her while arranging the pearl necklace over the elegant burgundy dress that Victoria had chosen for the occasion. It's not the plan that worries me, Hope. It's realizing how blind I've been. I trusted the wrong people for years, while ignoring those who truly deserved my attention. Their eyes met in the mirror, and at that moment, something subtly changed between them. They were no longer just circumstantial allies united against a common threat. A deeper connection had emerged, based on mutual recognition of their shared values. Sometimes, ma'am, we see what we expect to see. The difference lies in our willingness to recognize our mistakes and correct course. Victoria smiled slightly. For a servant, you have remarkable wisdom. And for an heiress, you have uncommon humility, Hope replied, allowing herself a small smile. At 7 o'clock, guests began to arrive. The estate sparkled under strategically placed lights that highlighted its colonial architecture. In the gardens, elegant tents had been set up with tables for the cocktail reception prior to the formal dinner, which would be served in the main hall. Hope, dressed in a more formal black uniform than her usual attire, remained near Victoria, like a discreet shadow. She observed each interaction, each gesture, especially when Marcus or Jack Owens approached to converse with the hostess. "You look radiant tonight, cousin," Marcus commented, ceremoniously kissing Victoria's cheeks. "This celebration promises to be unforgettable." "Without a doubt it will be," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure many will remember this night for a long time." The insinuation went unnoticed by Marcus, who confidently moved away to greet other important guests. Gabrielle fluttered between groups, ensuring all the right people were connecting, always casting suspicious glances toward Hope. At 9 o'clock, bells sounded announcing dinner. The guests moved to the main hall, magnificently decorated with traditional southern motifs that honored the region's cultural heritage. The main table, where Victoria would sit with the most distinguished guests, occupied a prominent place on a slightly elevated platform. Michael had strategically positioned his men around the hall, and he himself remained near the main entrance, maintaining constant visual contact with Hope. Everything was ready for the crucial moment of the night. The first courses passed without incident. Conversation flowed animatedly as waiters served delicacies prepared by the region's best chefs. When the time came for the main course, Hope noticed Scott Miller personally approaching the kitchen, returning minutes later with a small silver teapot. It was time. Following the agreed plan, Hope approached Victoria and leaned in to whisper something in her ear, as if transmitting an important message. In reality, she was confirming that everything was in position. Victoria nodded discreetly. Scott approached the main table with the teapot on a silver tray. "Mrs. Blackwood, the special tea that was ordered for you," he announced with a formal bow. Victoria smiled politely. "Thank you, Scott. But I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't order any special tea." The waiter looked confused, but Mr. Ellis insisted it was your favorite, a traditional tea to accompany the toast. "My cousin ordered a tea. Specifically for me?" Victoria asked, slightly raising her voice so nearby diners could hear. "How considerate of him. Marcus, could you explain what this special blend contains?" All eyes turned to Marcus, whose face had lost some color. "It's simply a traditional herbal blend to honor our customs during the harvest celebration." "How interesting," Victoria continued, maintaining her perfect composure, "because I understand that this traditional blend contains concentrated doses of valerian and other herbs that, combined, could cause effects similar to an anxiety attack. Is that our tradition, Marcus? Drugging family members?" A murmur ran through the table. Marcus stood up abruptly. "I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria. It's a simple tea. If you don't want it, don't drink it." "Why don't you try it then?" Victoria suggested, maintaining a cordial tone that contrasted with the growing tension. Before Marcus could respond, Michael approached the main table, followed by two of his men. In his hands, he carried a folder. "Excuse the interruption, Mrs. Victoria," he said in a clear, firm voice, "but I believe these documents are relevant to the current conversation." Silence fell over the hall as Michael placed on the table the documents that Hope had discovered. The restructuring proposal, the calendar with notes about the special tea, and something new, an email exchange between Marcus and Jack Owens, explicitly discussing how to neutralize Victoria during the event. "Allow me to share with our distinguished guests what I've discovered," Victoria began, standing with dignity. "A conspiracy to strip me of control of the family businesses, orchestrated by my own cousin, and people I considered part of my circle of trust." Marcus tried to interrupt, but Victoria continued, her voice gaining strength. "For years, I've worked to continue my father's legacy, a vision of a company that thrives while contributing to the well-being of all who are part of it. Some consider this vision threatens their interests. They have the right to openly oppose it, but resorting to tactics like this," she pointed to the teapot with the adulterated tea, "this crosses a line that no Blackwood should cross." Marcus's face contorted in a mixture of rage and shame. Jack Owens, seated a few chairs away, seemed to be frantically searching for an exit. Gabrielle, who had remained near the entrance to the hall, took a step back, as if preparing to flee. "Michael," Victoria called, "please ensure that our guests can enjoy the rest of the evening without interruptions, and that no one leaves the estate until we have completely clarified this situation." The security chief nodded, signaling his men to take positions at all exits. Hope observed from a discreet background, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. The most obvious part of the conspiracy had been exposed, but she knew there were deeper threads to unravel, connections that extended beyond the estate and the Blackwood family. As nervous murmurs ran through the hall and Marcus was discreetly escorted out of the guest's sight, Victoria's eyes sought Hope's. In that silent look was a promise. What had begun as a circumstantial alliance had transformed into something more significant, a shared commitment to change things from within, from the positions that each occupied on opposite sides of the social spectrum. The morning after the harvest celebration, Blackwood Estate awoke with a completely different atmosphere. The sun shone with the same intensity over the meticulously maintained gardens, but something fundamental had changed in the very foundations of family power. Hope performed her morning tasks with the same discretion as always, although now the looks she received from other employees were charged with curiosity, and in some cases, a new respect. Rumors about her role in the previous night's events had spread quickly among the staff, transforming her from a simple newly arrived servant into an enigmatic figure whose true nature no one seemed to completely understand. "Good morning, Hope," greeted Mrs. Evelyn, the housekeeper, with a considerably warmer tone than usual. "Mrs. Victoria is expecting you in the library when you finish here." Hope nodded, maintaining her serene expression as she continued arranging fresh flowers in the main reception area. Internally, however, she wondered what turn events would take now. The night before, after the guests had left and Marcus had been confined to his rooms under surveillance, she hadn't had the opportunity to speak privately with Victoria. Both were too busy handling the immediate consequences of the public confrontation. An hour later, Hope headed to the library, an impressive space with shelves reaching to the ceiling, filled with ancient and modern volumes that reflected the refined education of generations of Blackwoods. She found Victoria sitting next to one of the windows, overlooking the main garden with a cup of coffee in her hands and a thoughtful expression. "You sent for me, ma'am?" Hope asked, remaining near the entrance. Victoria looked up and smiled slightly. "Come in, Hope, and please, close the door." "When?" Hope obeyed. Victoria pointed to the armchair across from her. "Sit down. I think we've reached a point where we can forget some formalities, at least when we're alone." Hope hesitated for a moment before taking a seat, still uncomfortable with the change in dynamics between them. "Marcus has been temporarily removed from all his positions in the family businesses," Victoria began without preamble. "The board called an emergency session this morning, after reviewing the evidence we presented. Jack Owens has been dismissed from all projects associated with us, and Gabrielle—" She paused, a shadow of pain crossing her face. "Gabrielle decided to resign before facing a formal investigation." "And the others involved?" Hope asked. "We're reviewing every connection, every contract. Michael is coordinating a thorough investigation into the Land Guardians and their links with people within our organization. It seems the network is more extensive than we initially imagined." Hope nodded, processing the information. It was a beginning, but both knew that dismantling such deeply rooted power structures would take time and face resistance. "And now, regarding you," Victoria continued, placing her cup on the side table. "We have a pending conversation about your future at the estate." Hope's heart skipped a beat. Despite everything that had happened, a part of her had anticipated this moment with apprehension. What place could exist for her now that her mission was fulfilled? "After what you've done for me and for this family, it would be absurd for you to continue as a servant," Victoria declared firmly. "I want to offer you a formal position in the estate's administration, possibly as my personal assistant now that Gabrielle is gone, or in any other position you consider suitable for your skills." The proposal, though generous and expected in a way, caused immediate discomfort in Hope. This wasn't what she had come seeking. "I sincerely thank you, ma'am, but I must decline." Victoria seemed genuinely surprised. "You decline?" "Hope, you have exceptional intelligence and analytical ability. It would be a waste for you to continue cleaning rooms and serving tea." "It's not a question of ability, but of purpose," Hope replied, carefully choosing her words. "I didn't come here seeking social advancement or recognition. I came for a personal debt, which I now consider paid." "Then you plan to leave?" Victoria asked, and Hope detected a tone of disappointment in her voice. "Not necessarily. If you'll Allow me, I'd like to continue working at the estate, but on my own terms. Victoria leaned forward, intrigued. I'm listening. Servants are invisible, ma'am. They go unnoticed in important meetings, hear conversations others believe private. They can access places where not even the head of security has natural access. Hope paused, making sure Victoria understood the direction of her proposal. If you truly want to transform the Blackwood companies and protect yourself against future conspiracies, you'll need eyes and ears in places where no one would suspect someone is watching. A slow smile of understanding spread across Victoria's. Theos, you propose to continue being a servant, but in reality you would be my informant. Not just yours, ma'am. I propose creating an information network among service staff, not only at the estate, but in all Blackwood properties and businesses. Ordinary people who observe, listen, and report directly to you or Michael, without intermediaries who might filter or distort the information. Victoria reclined in her seat, considering the proposal with a thoughtful expression. It's a bold idea and potentially very effective, but it also means you would continue living a life of service when you could aspire to much more. Each person finds meaning in their own way, ma'am. For me, being able to contribute to the kind of change you represent from a position where I can be genuinely useful is more valuable than any title or high salary. After a moment of reflection, Victoria nodded. Very well, Hope, I'll accept your proposal, but with some conditions. First, although you maintain your visible position as part of the service staff, you'll have a formal contract with benefits appropriate to your real responsibilities. Second, you'll participate in regular strategic meetings with me and Michael. And third, you must promise me that if at any point you feel this situation no longer satisfies you, you'll tell me directly. Those seem like fair terms, Hope accepted with a slight smile. The following weeks brought substantial changes to Blackwood Estate and the corporate structure of the family businesses. With Marcus effectively neutralized and his closest allies removed from positions of power, Victoria was able to implement reforms she had contemplated for years, but which had faced systematic resistance. She established a community council that included worker representatives from each division of the Blackwood companies, giving them a real voice in decisions that affected their working conditions. She launched educational programs for employees' children from basic to university level. She reviewed contracts with local suppliers to ensure more equitable terms, privileging cooperatives and small producers over large corporations. Hope, meanwhile, began to discreetly build her information network. She started with Mary, a young woman who worked in the kitchens and had demonstrated both intelligence and integrity. Then included Thomas, a trusted gardener who had been in the family service for decades and knew every corner of the property. Then added Carrie, a maid who worked in the corporate offices in Savannah and had access to conversations between executives and business partners. Little by little, without fanfare or official announcements, an invisible but effective network was woven that kept Victoria informed of subtle movements, seemingly innocent comments, and patterns of behavior that could indicate new threats or resistance to her change initiatives. One afternoon, 3 months after the failed conspiracy, Victoria received an urgent message from Michael. The Guardians had been identified holding meetings at a rural property belonging to a former family associate. The information had come through Jason, a stable boy recently incorporated into Hope's network, who had overheard fragments of conversation while delivering horses to said property. "We need to act with caution," Hope warned during the emergency meeting in Victoria's private office. "This group has significant political connections. One false move could trigger reprisals that would affect not only you, but the entire company." "I agree," Michael intervened. "I propose an indirect approach. Instead of confronting them directly, we can use the same means they do: information and subtle pressure." The strategy they developed that night represented a new way of doing business for the Blackwoods. Instead of using financial muscle or direct influence, they employed the extensive network of contacts and information they had built to gradually neutralize the threat. They documented irregular activities, identified legal and financial vulnerabilities, and when they had enough material, initiated strategic conversations with key people, who could influence the Guardians to desist from any action against the Blackwoods. This subtle but effective approach would characterize the new era of the Blackwood companies under Victoria's leadership, an era where power wasn't openly exercised from above, but flowed through a complex network of relationships, information, and shared principles that united people of all social and economic levels. 6 months after the failed attempt to overthrow Victoria, Blackwood Estate hosted a different celebration. It wasn't an ostentatious event to impress investors or political figures, but a simple gathering for all employees and their families. Long tables had been set up in the extensive gardens, where high-level executives shared food and conversation with gardeners, maids, and farm laborers. Victoria moved among the groups, greeting each person by name, taking a genuine interest in their families and concerns. For many of those present, it was the first time they had entered the estate as guests and not as servers, an experience that subtly transformed the dynamic between employer and employee. Hope observed from a discreet distance, feeling a deep satisfaction at seeing what once seemed an impossible dream materialized. Her gaze met Victoria's, who made a subtle signal for her to join her on the main porch. "All this is thanks to you," Victoria commented when Hope approached. "It's your vision that has made it possible, Ma'am. I just helped protect it." "You've done much more than that, Hope. You've helped me see my own company, my own life, from a completely different perspective. You've shown me that true power isn't in controlling, but in connecting, in building bridges between worlds that normally remain separate." Hope smiled, finally accepting the compliment. "Perhaps we've both learned that lesson. There's something I want to show you," said Victoria, indicating that she should follow her to a part of the estate that had remained closed for years, the West Wing, where the private rooms of the late Mr. Richard were located. Upon entering what had been the patriarch's personal study, Hope noticed that the space had been transformed. It was no longer the masculine sanctuary full of hunting trophies and solemn portraits of ancestors, but a bright and functional space. "I'm converting this wing into a training center for our employees' children," Victoria explained. "There will be a library, classrooms for school reinforcement classes, technical and artistic training workshops, and I want you to run it." Hope looked at her in surprise. "Ma'am, I appreciate the trust, but—" "I know what you're going to say," Victoria interrupted with a smile, "that you prefer to maintain your discreet role, that your work in the shadows is more valuable, and I respect that. That's why I'm not asking you to abandon your current position, but to add this responsibility in the way you consider appropriate." The proposal was tempting and perfectly reflected the new paradigm they were building together, a system where formal hierarchies mattered less than capacity and commitment, where a person could simultaneously exist in different social spaces without losing their essence. "I'll think about it seriously," Hope finally responded. Later that night, when the celebration had ended and most of the employees had left, Hope found herself walking alone through the estate's gardens. The full moon illuminated the path with an almost magical clarity, blurring the boundaries between light and shadow, between what was and what could be. She stopped in front of an ancient oak tree that had witnessed generations of the Blackwood family grow, prosper, and in some cases lose their way. Under its branches, she allowed herself a moment of reflection on the strange and beautiful path that life had traced for her. 15 years ago, a frightened young woman had protected an heiress during a storm, without imagining that this simple act of humanity would have consequences that would transform both lives. The violence that followed that initial encounter could have turned her into a bitter victim, or someone determined to seek revenge. Instead, she had found a higher purpose: to contribute to building a system where such injustices would become increasingly less possible. Victoria, for her part, had transcended the limitations of her privileged upbringing to see beyond artificial social divisions and recognize the inherent value of each person, regardless of their origin or formal position. Together, they represented a different possibility, a reminder that even within deeply unequal systems, committed individuals could create spaces of dignity and genuine transformation. Hope took from her pocket the brooch with the Blackwood crest that she had kept for 15 years She observed it shine under the moonlight, no longer as a symbol of aristocratic power, but as the reminder of a fulfilled and renewed promise. Tomorrow, she decided, she would accept Victoria's proposal about the training center, but with one condition: that it bear the name of her grandmother, Dorothy, who had taught her that true nobility doesn't come from titles or possessions, but from the way we treat others, especially those whom society considers invisible. With that resolution in mind, Hope put the brooch away again and headed toward the service wing. Her simple bed in the small room she shared with another servant awaited her, just like every night. Because despite her growing influence and Victoria's trust, she had consciously chosen to maintain that anchor in the everyday reality of those who served. Only in this way could she be an effective bridge between two worlds, always remembering that real changes don't occur in grandiloquent declarations or dramatic reorganizations, but in the small daily gestures that gradually redefine what is possible and just in human relationships. And as Blackwood Estate slept under the starry mantle of the Georgia night, two women of radically different origins dreamed of a common future where power served justice and invisibility was a strategic choice, not a condemnation imposed by the circumstances of birth. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Hope and Victoria has moved you and shown that social barriers can be broken down when there is true empathy and shared purpose. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about people who silently transform the world from their positions. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the power of mutual understanding. Have you ever witnessed a friendship that transcends social barriers? Or perhaps you yourselves have experienced an